Hello, and thank you for checking out our recorded workshop on professor communications. This workshop was initially held on Wednesday, October 7th at 6 p.m. and presented by academic coaches Ella Itzak and Sam DeZerga. Enjoy.
I'm Ella. I'm an academic success coach at TCC, and I can help students with time management skills, stress management skills, study skills, and I am also a master's student at FSU, so I definitely communicate with my professors a lot. So, yeah.
And my name is Sam, and I'm also an academic success coach at Tallahassee Community College, and I specialize in areas of study and test-taking strategies, in note-taking skills, as well as academic motivation and goals. Although, just like Ella, I can help you out with pretty much any topic of coaching or academic strategies that you need assistance with. And I am also a master's student over at Florida State, finishing my final semester, fingers crossed, like I said, this term.
Okay, so first of all, we should take a moment to think about a scenario. Imagine that recently you got sick and you missed two important assignments. So what do you think in this situation you should do? You could either take the loss and move forward and just forget about it. You could call your professor crying, hoping to convince them to extend the deadline, or you could just email them and explain your circumstances. Think about it. So you're definitely going to want to email them. There's really no reason to call them and cry. You might think that it could be a good idea to try to make them think that you care, but that's really unnecessary. We can just email them explaining the circumstances logically, and most times professors are willing to work with students that are having issues.
Yeah, but you definitely don't want to do number one. You don't want to just take the loss
Yes.
on. You definitely want to, lean on number three there, email them and explain the circumstance.
Yes. Okay, so we'll do a really quick poll now just to see how many of you watching this have reached out to a professor yet this semester. So if you have, say that you have, and if you haven't, say that you have not. So obviously communicating with professors is very important. It can be important for a few different reasons. First of all, it can be really good to build relationships with professors just to show that you are more than just a student taking their class. It can prove that you have different interests in different areas. And this kind of goes along with number 3 on this slide, showing that you care. Forming relationships with your professors is definitely just going to prove to them that you care about your own success and care about your success in that class. And then number 2 on this slide says connections. So you never really know who you're dealing with professors. They could oftentimes have really diverse backgrounds that you don't even realize they did something that could be directly relating to something that you're interested in. So they could honestly be really good people to make a relationship with just for the fact that you could end up having them write a letter of recommendation for you, or you could end up just learning a lot from them outside of the class information.
And you'd all be surprised at how many students actually do not reach out to their professors. It is so important to make that connection, to build that relationship with your professors, and truly show them that you do care about the class. Because if you just sort of fall off the radar and you stop going to class and you stop turning in assignments, the professor is not going to know what's going on unless you tell them. So important to communicate with your professor when you need to.
Yes. So moving into a little bit of how to communicate, like before we even start about the different methods, it's important to recognize that the timing matters. So you're not going to want to reach out too late to your professors. So this is in terms of like hours in the day. So just remembering that professors are people and they go to sleep at night most of the time. So you're really not going to call their office at 10 o'clock at night. They're not going to be there. So you're going to want to reach out early. They don't often, professors dislike when a student procrastinates asking for help until the last minute. You're not going to want to wait until the day before an exam to ask for help. This is kind of going to go along with what we said previously about showing the professor that you care about the class, is not waiting until the last minute to ask for help. It's good to ask for help, but you're going to want to do so in a timely manner. And then this ties in with the third thing on here, giving enough time to respond. If you need the answer to something, you're going to want to give yourself and the professor enough time to actually respond. If you ask for help the day before an exam, and the professor doesn't see it until the day after the exam, then you might as well have never asked, because they're not going to get back to you in time. So you're going to want to make sure that you have enough time to actually get responses that you need. So just build in enough time when you're asking or emailing or calling, whatever you're doing, build in enough time for them to actually get back with you.
Yep, and like Ella said earlier, professors are people too. And so you are probably not sitting on your email all day and answering within a moment's notice. And so you have to have that same expectation for your professors as well. They're not going to respond right away in most cases. I mean, sometimes they do, but in many cases, they are not going to reach out immediately after you email them. And so be patient. Definitely reach out early enough so that you can receive a response that actually helps you out. These are great points for communicating with your professor.
Okay, so we have pretty much three main methods of communicating. There's obviously in person, which is a little bit hard to do right now, depending on if you have any classes that are actually in person. There's emailing, and then there's calling. And then again, because of right now, there's kind of like the fourth option that ties in with all three of them, which is Zooming. So we'll get into all of these in a few more slides, but mainly the most important takeaway, I think, is that most professors prefer to be contacted through email because they can respond on their own time. So that doesn't mean that speaking to them in person or calling is not a good method of communication, but emailing tends to be preferred by professors. So in person is probably going to be the most effective form of communication, just because, you know, you're there and you can see each other, you can talk face to face. Again, this is kind of, who knows if this is possible right now for different circumstances and different people, but this can be tied back into Zoom as well. So if you have a TCC live course where you're Zooming with your professor in designated hours, this can go for that as well. So you're pretty much going to want to follow a few basic guidelines. You're going to want to approach the professor when they're free. So if they're speaking to another student, obviously you're not going to want to be rude and get up in the space and try to interrupt. That's a no. You're just going to want to wait your turn. You're going to want to be cordial and respectful. Just don't talk to them like it's your friend. Speak semi-professionally, and then be specific and get to the point. So if you have something specific that you want to ask, for example, if you're saying, I want to have an extension on the deadline for this upcoming assignment, don't go up there and dilly-dally with them and say, oh, well, you know, how's your day been? I mean, that's nice. You can be polite, but don't just try to waste time because you know you're asking for something. There, you kind of know that you're up there to get something from them. So you're going to want to just kind of address it as sooner rather than later.
Right. And then also with in-person, and this ties into Zoom meetings as well, you want to pick an appropriate time to talk to your professor, obviously when they're free, but also you want to make sure that, you know, if this is during a class session, then you might want to wait until the end or the beginning before anyone else is there. Maybe you get there a little bit early and you know that that professor opens up the Zoom a little bit early. You could always speak to them then, or of course ask to speak with them privately after your Zoom class or after the class. In addition, definitely take advantage of a professor's office hours. These are typically hours where a professor is just there to handle students' questions and student needs. And it is something that is highly underutilized by students to communicate with their professors. So you could always check the syllabus of your professor to see if there are any office hours listed. They likely are there, along with a link to a Zoom room. And all you do is you show up during that time, and pretty much now you have free time to chat with your professor when those needs do come up. But once again, you do want to make sure that you do kind of get to the point, because they do know that you are trying to ask something of them, so it's better to just be straightforward with it.
Yes. And then one more thing about just communicating in person, it's going to also matter what you're trying to say. So if you're more looking for something that's kind of quick and academic, say, hey, I want an extension, please, 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 then that is probably something that would be able to be just at the end of a class, you walk up to your professor or you say, hey, in Zoom, hey, can this happen? If you're looking more to like ask them about what their background is in, or if you're trying to, what we were mentioning earlier, build a bit of a relationship with the professor, then that's definitely something that you're going to want to do during office hours or schedule a separate meeting for.
Yes.
So now moving on to calling professors. This one is, again, they're all kind of interconnected because they're all similar, especially with Zoom now. So this can go for Zoom, this can go for calling, and then a lot of this overlaps with just speaking in person. But always for calling, check the syllabus, because like Sam mentioned previously, they pretty much always have assigned office hours when they are willing to speak with you. So if you need to make a phone call and you know that they're going to definitely be in their office from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Monday, then you can pretty much bet that they'll actually pick up the phone in that time. So make sure you check the syllabus to see if there are any designated hours that they're going to be in their office, because that's going to be the best bet for actually getting them on the phone. And then just like with speaking in person, you're going to want to greet them politely and respectfully, know what you want to say. If you are trying to ask for an extension, also goes for being in person, just explain your circumstances logically. Most professors are willing to work with students, especially when circumstances are not so great. They're pretty understanding. And then also just be prepared to leave a voicemail for the phone. You could have it all thought out of what you want to say when your professor answers the phone, but then if they don't pick up and you get the voicemail and you're sitting there going, oh no, what should I say? Make sure that you have it in the back of your mind, okay, I might get their voicemail and let me just be ready to have the information to leave a voicemail.
And I always recommend, actually, when calling professors, that you go ahead and you sort of write down what you want to say. It's very easy when you're preparing to make that phone call. Sometimes it can be a little nerve-wracking. I know when I make phone calls, I don't always like making phone calls. Sometimes you get a little anxiety, a little nervous making that phone call. And so you may come up in your head all the things you want to say to that professor, but then when it comes time to actually either speaking to the professor or leaving that voicemail, you all of a sudden just blank. You remember those key points, but then the rest of it is just gone. And so I recommend writing it down before you make that phone call. What are your key points? What do you want to say? Don't write out a script, like you don't want to be that formal, but you do want to remember to hit all of those key points. Also, leaving a voicemail, I recommend go ahead and writing sort of an abridged version of what you wanted to say during the phone call. Write it down what you want to say in your voicemail. And you don't want to go into too many details while you're leaving the voicemail, just a very brief message that you are, a student in one of their classes, leave your name, your number, and let them know that they can get back to you. So don't get too detailed in those voicemails. I don't think anyone wants to listen to a 5-minute voicemail explaining different circumstances, asking different questions. That's going to be way too difficult to keep track of. So keep it brief, but definitely know the direction you want that phone call to go in.
Yes. Okay, now for emailing. This is probably the most important because this is the easiest and professors prefer it again. So a lot of students have issues where they say, oh, I emailed my professor and they never got back to me. So it's important to remember that there's specific ways that professors oftentimes want you to go about emailing them. So they're going to want and they're going to expect professionalism a lot of the time. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be using the biggest words that you know, but it does mean that you're going to want to keep pretty much these 3 things in mind. So adding a subject to the email is not necessarily required, but it's definitely a good idea to just give the professor an idea of what you want. So it's just a short version, a short little, think of a word, a short little what? Short little blurb?
Description.
Yes, thank you. So this is just going to be a short little description of what exactly the email will entail. So the example I have up here is Mac 1105 possible extension. So the professor would read this and say, okay, this is going to be about this class that I teach and somebody wants an extension. So they'll have just a little bit of a brief background before they open the email.
Yep.
And
Short.
this,
Sorry. I was just going to say, it's just short and sweet, a description very quickly. And I'd say a subject is also very helpful when professors have to search for your email. So if it gets sort of lost in the shuffle, I'm sure professors are getting hundreds of emails per day. But if you add a subject and it's descriptive enough, they could always sort of type that description in their search bar and find your email really easily. So I would recommend you do go ahead and add that subject in there just as a descriptor.
yes. And then this one is something you are always going to want to do no matter what. You always need to include the course number and the time. This could be a very good reason why if you sent an email and did not get a response, this could be why. Professors teach a lot of different classes and a lot of different sections of the same class, so you definitely need to identify who you are and what class exactly that you're taking. So you would say, hello, my name is Ella Itzhak. I'm taking your Mac 1105 class, but don't just leave it at that. Go in depth about I'm taking it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8 a.m. Because a lot of times a professor that's teaching college algebra, which is Mac 1105, they might be teaching 5 different classes of Mac 1105. So you're going to want to make sure that you identify exactly which section you're taking with them. And then finally, just always try to address them professionally. So doctor or professor. You might not know if they're a doctor, because not all professors are doctors, some are not. So you don't want to be calling someone doctor if they're not a doctor. So a good guideline is to always just say professor. Professor works for everyone. But if you do know that they're a doctor, you can always say, hello, Dr. Vic. Hello, Professor DeZerba, anything like that. Just make sure that you're not saying like, hey, Sam.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I always fall back on professor because I'm never sure whether someone is doctor last name. I just always go ahead and use professor. But the big piece here is that you don't want to just call them by their first name unless, of course, if it's already been determined between you and the professor that you're on a first name basis, then go for it. But always err on the side of caution. Go with the more formal professor last name than saying, oh, well, hey, Ella.
Yes. And professors, sometimes it depends on who you're working with, but some professors are extremely picky about wanting you to be professional, and other professors don't really care. So it's a better idea just to try to be professional all the time, because that's going to be your best bet of getting an actual response. Some of them seriously want you to say, hello, doctor, whatever, and be extremely professional, grammatically correct, have proper sentence structure, or else they won't respond. So it's a good idea to just try to be professional.
Yeah.
So now we'll go into some examples. This is a very bad example of how to email your professors. This might be an email that had been ignored. So there's no subject we see, and it just says, hi Sam, I'm failing your English class and I want to know how to pass. Ella. So there's no identification here of, it says Ella, but she might have 5 different Ellas, or he or she might have 5 different Ellas. So that is not a good identification of yourself. There's no identification of the class that you are trying to pass. There's no, it's much too friendly. It's very unprofessional. It doesn't say hello, professor, hello, doctor, none of that. And it sounds very nonchalant. It seems like you might think that this is oh yeah, I'm trying to prove that I care about the class. But really saying, I'm failing your English class and I want to know how to pass, it kind of just makes it seem like, well, the way to pass is studying. That's obviously the way to pass. So you definitely will want to address something specific that you're having trouble with. You're not just going to want to say, I'm failing your class, I want to know how to pass. You're going to want to say, I was having trouble with the last assignment, or I'm having trouble with this big topic that we're working on. I'm wondering if you could help me, something like that. Make sure that it's just not so broad like that. And then it doesn't really say a closing remark, so it would be nice to see something that says like sincerely or regards before you write your name. That's just another thing that's polite and professional. So here we can see a good example. It has a subject. So the professor will get the clue that, okay, this is going to be about an English class, an English student wanting a due date extension. It says, hello, Professor DeZerga. That's professional. My name is Ella Itzhak. I'm in your ENC 1101 class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 in the morning. So now they know, okay, this person from this class that I teach on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. It says, I'm emailing you in hopes of receiving an extension of the deadline for assignment 1. So that's a way to respectfully ask for an extension. You're not saying, oh, I need an extension.
I just need an extension. Please
No.
give me an extension.
Yes. Be respectful when you're asking for favors like that. And then it goes into explaining the circumstance. I've just been very sick the past 4 days and I'm just now starting to feel better. And then it also importantly says I can provide you with a doctor's note if necessary. So obviously no one wants to be in the position where they have to prove the fact that they were sick, but sometimes it just can be a good way to prove that you were sick and that if you hadn't been sick, you would have been keeping up with the work. So you don't necessarily have to attach a doctor's note or anything like that in the primary email, but just saying I can provide you if you need it, it kind of makes it seem more real, like you actually were sick.
Right. It opens up that conversation just in case the professor does need it, then they can say, of course, go ahead and send me that doctor's note and we'll work together from that point.
Yes. And then that kind of, again, proves why an extension is necessary. And it shows that you weren't really just wasting your time, but you were actually needing an extension. And then at the end, it says, I want to succeed in your class and I'm working towards completing all of my work as soon as possible. So again, instead of just saying, I want to pass your class, this is more detailed explaining the reason or the desire to succeed in the class. So this is, again, just proving, I care about the class, I want to do well, but it's not just saying, I want to pass. And then finally, it says, please let me know if this is possible. So asking for the professor to get back in touch is, again, another like professional, but just respectful, polite thing to do. Like, it's kind of like, hey, get back to me, please. So that is always something I include. And then again, it says, sincerely, it has a closing remark, Ella Itzhak. So this is just a good example of something that is professional. Okay, so now what if they don't respond?
It happens.
Yes, a lot of students say, oh, they don't respond. So if they don't respond to a phone call, obviously you're going to be wanting to leave a voicemail and ask them to get back with you as soon as possible. If they don't get back with you within probably, I would say, a few days, give them a bit of time to get back to you. But then if a few days go by and you don't hear from them, then it's safe to give a second call or send an email, anything, just like a second attempt at communicating. For an email, same thing, give them a few days to respond. And then if they don't respond, just send a follow-up email, attach it to the first email you sent and say, hi, I'm just checking to make sure you saw my last email. Don't be rude and say like, hey, you didn't answer me. Like, just say, hi, I'm just checking to see that you saw it. Sometimes like professors honestly just miss them, or who knows, maybe they were sick just like you were sick, or maybe something happened. I don't know. You just never know. And then this kind of goes into number 3 of just make sure that you're kind and nice, because professors are people too. They might just miss your email or miss your call on accident. They might be sick. Who knows what's going on? So just give them a few days to respond before you follow up, and just be nice in your interactions.
Yes. And something else that you might want to do is if you've called them, you've sent them an email, once again, make sure you check the syllabus for office hours, because they might have those open hours where you can just drop in their Zoom session and voila, there they are. You can ask your question and you can move on with your day. But another way, if you are preferring written communication and you've sent them an email and you haven't heard back in a while, try sending them a message through Canvas as well. Because if they are teaching through Canvas and using Canvas, then every time they log on, they'll see that number in their inbox. They'll know to go ahead and check it. And I'm certain that less students are messaging their professors through Canvas, and so less chance for those messages to get lost. And perhaps, like I said, an inbox where they're likely getting hundreds of messages from students per day. Pretty easy to lose an email that way. And so try messaging them through Canvas, drop into their office hours on Zoom. Any of these should help you get in contact with that professor.
If you ever think to yourself, should I contact this professor? Like, I'm doing okay, but I don't know, maybe I need help. Like, just do it. Just contact them. There's like pretty much nothing that can go bad from reaching out. I mean, they might not respond, or they might say no to whatever you're asking for. But overall, there's not really any harm that can come from just reaching out. So I always say, like, if you're wondering, like, just do it. Like, if even the thought crosses your mind, just do it. Just do it. Just reach out. It's always a good idea.
Yeah, and I'm going to put the offer out there for students too. And I do this for students, and I'm sure that Ella would do this for her students as well. But if you are thinking about reaching out to your professor and you are nervous about reaching out to them, or you don't quite know what to say, and you want to practice with us, we can pretend to be your professor. Draft an email and you want us to look it over with you and to make pointers and help you make changes to that email so that's in tip-top shape to send to your professor, more than happy to do that. Practicing a phone conversation or a Zoom call so that you can sort of figure out how to get right to the point in asking your questions, all things that academic coaching can help you out with. Am I right, Ella?
Yes, I will help. Okay, so now to kind of bring it back to the first activity that we did, just reconsider the scenario. Remember, you recently got sick and you missed 2 important assignments, so what should you do? We pretty much have established now that we should email the professor. Of course, it's up to you. You could call as well. You could try to tune into office hours, anything. But now we know how to reach out. Let's try to actually draft an email. So we're going to work together and try to make an email, and just take a minute to think about it. Like, you don't have to obviously write it down or anything, but just think about if you can remember all of the different things to include in an email. Think about that.
And if you would like to draft that email, like if you're seriously considering drafting an email that you have to send to your professor, you can go ahead and drop that here.
Okay, so in summary, there are many ways to reach out to professors: emailing, calling, Zooming, in person, all these different ways. There's not necessarily any better way than another. Many professors prefer emails, but that doesn't mean that other ways are not as good. There's many reasons to reach out to professors. Again, a lot of students don't reach out unless they need something. So that is always a reason to reach out, but also you can just try to get to know your professors as well. And I'm sure that they would honestly appreciate that, because most students just contact when they need something. So yeah, and then most professors are generally happy to help students. A lot of times people fall on rather unfortunate circumstances, and it's pretty rare that, at least I've seen, a professor just be like, no, I'm not going to help you, or I'm not going to work with you. For the most part, they are willing to work with you and help. It might not be exactly in the capacity that you're expecting, but it will be most of the time they're willing to help. Being respectful and professional is the most likely way to get a response. That's, again, what we're referring to specifically with emails, but that goes for everything. And then just overall, just remember that professors are people too. Don't expect a response really fast. You might get a response really fast, but you might not. So just make sure that you're being nice in all of your interactions and understanding that just like you're going through things, they are as well. So yeah.
Awesome. So that concludes our Professor Communication Workshop. If you have absolutely any questions, I'm going to flip really quickly back to the slide at the very beginning where it had our names and our email addresses. You are welcome to send either of us or both of us an email if you do have any questions, or if you would like to work further on Professor Communications. If you want to draft that email and have one of us look over it, we are more than happy to do so. Or if you'd like to work on advancing any of the academic skills that you see listed on this slide, as well as any other academic skills that you feel you need help in advancing. But once again, we want to thank you for coming to our workshop today, and we hope to chat with you soon.
Yes.
Bye.